Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Black Parents Aging. It's Olivia here. I don't have Nicola with me for this episode, but I do have a special guest that I know you guys are going to love, and that is Dr. Monique Nugent. And she is an MD, a medical doctor, and has her master's of public health. And so I'm really excited to speak with her today and hear what information she has for us. Welcome to the show, Dr. Nugent.
Thank you so much for having me, Olivia. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Now, I know this is going to be a great conversation. Dr. Nugent is also the author of Prescription for Admission, a doctor's guide for navigating the hospital, advocating for yourself, and having a better hospitalization. And so we're going to be talking all things medical advocacy. And I know that we've touched on this a little bit in some previous episodes, but guys, today we have an expert. And so before we jump in, Dr. Nugent, can you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what brought you to this particular space?
Yeah. I am a hospitalist, and that's not a specialty that a lot of people are familiar with unless you interact with hospitals a bunch. And so I grew up in New York. I did my medical schooling out in Southern California, and I moved here to the Massachusetts area. Well, I should say the Boston area to get my master's. And in residency, I really started to find that the hospital is where I wanted to be. When I thought about fellowships, go off to become a cardiologist or a gastroenterologist. I had somebody tell me, an attending tell me, you have to pick something A, you can do forever, and B, where you feel like you can make the biggest impact. And for me, it was the hospital. It's not a space or a place where a lot of people are comfortable or excited. But like the DMV, we all come there at some point in time. And so it's a place where I found that I could dedicate my career to making that experience safer for patients, better for patients, and really advocate for a place that we all will interact with for it to be high quality, safe, and timely for all patients.
And when we think of hospitals, those aren't the things that we think of when we think of
No.
hospitals. But for those of the listeners that don't know what a hospitalist is, can you break that down a little for us?
Yeah. So I'm a board certified internist, which means that I've specialized in the care of adults and I only see patients in the hospital. So if you come to the hospital, you're too sick to leave the emergency department. So you have to be admitted, but you don't need the ICU. The ICU is where you'll see intensivists, right? I will be the doctor, the specialist who takes care of you on the floors of the hospital. It's a fairly young specialty within medicine. If you think about the history of medicine, everyone knows who their cardiologist is and who their endocrinologist is. Those are longstanding specialties. But in the 90s, what ended up happening was a bunch of physicians were saying to doctors, well, traditionally we see patients in the office and then we come to the hospital and we see patients again in the hospital. How about I'll see your patients here in the hospital, you stay in the office? Because caring for patients acutely hospitalized is its own specialty. There's
Mm.
a lot of things that happen in hospitals as far as safety and risk, setting people up for success after hospitalization that really requires you to focus your time and your care in hospitals. And so it's a model of care that has grown within medicine. So obstetricians will practice as laborists, meaning obstetricians who only stay in the hospital and help patients who are laboring, versus doing the same thing where they rotate and they go to the operating room and they're back in the clinic. And those models of medicine are changing. And so hospitals tend to like hospitalists because we're always around versus doctors who are also in their office and go back and forth. And primary care doctors want to be in the clinic. And that's a totally different specialty within itself. And so it's a specialty that's really grown.
So I want to follow up a little bit on that because I have heard people who have loved ones in the hospital or may have been in the hospital themselves that are a little apprehensive that they are seeing a new doctor in the hospital, which is a hospitalist, that is someone they're not used to, that is not their doctor. And oftentimes they're like, where is my doctor? Like that's who knows me, that's who I want to see. Can you speak to just some of the benefits of the separation? And then also, what is the communication between maybe the doctor that you go see and the hospitalist? Because I do think there is some anxiety there between both family members and people that may be in the hospital.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So primary care doctors, to have a good practice of primary care doctors, they have thousands of patients on their panel, right? Like people don't realize. So my husband's a primary care doctor, and sometimes he will mention the number of patients on his panel, and it still makes me go like, wow, really? That many people. So they're responsible for that many lives and that many people who consider them my doctor, right? Um, and so a lot of the times that idea of coming into the hospital and seeing a new face is anxiety provoking because you've formed this relationship with your primary care doctor. But the truth of the matter is that hospital in medicine is, like I said, its own type of specialty. We use a lot of different tools to risk stratify patients for things. We work closely with case managers. We have relationships with the specialists who work in the hospital. And the benefit is that you get a dedicated group of physicians who are dedicated to you and their practice of medicine in the hospital. They're not running back and forth between clinic. There's somebody always available. When I leave after hours, another set of physicians comes in and takes care of patients from the hospital. The benefits for the hospital itself is that you get physicians who are dedicated and can work on getting patients the care that they need in a timely fashion, right? So hospitalists can help lower your length of stay within a hospital, and you get people who are dedicated to the practice and can lower some of these complication rates that you see. But when it comes to a patient, why would I want to be seen by a hospitalist? It's those same exact reasons. I want someone who's always there. I want someone who I can make an appointment to have a family meeting with and know that they're going to be able to come and they're not splitting their time between their other responsibilities to other patients. Our communication with your primary care doctor, a lot of the times it's kind of limited on a day-to-day basis for those exact reasons. When I call the office, they're still seeing patients, right? What we depend on is communicating with each other through the medical record. But my contact with a specialist who are seeing you in the hospital is very close. All right. I have access to those guys and I'm able to make a care plan and talk about that care plan throughout the day. In addition to that, my access to your case managers, your social worker, your physical therapist, your speech therapist, all those ancillary people seeing you in the hospital, very, very moment to moment, they can reach out to me. A lot of places have rounds where the whole team comes together and talks about the patients on the floor, right? So we're having these real-time conversations with those therapists. And so really, I encourage people to think of their hospitalist as my doctor, right? And it can be difficult because of also the model in which we work. We can't be in the hospital 365, right? Sure. So we work in several day chunks. Some hospitals work 7 days on, 7 days off. Some work 5 days at a time. And so depending on where you meet the doctor in their schedule, you might see them for your whole hospitalization, or you might see them when you're admitted and you won't see them the next day. And that can be hard and anxiety provoking as well. But just like I expect my team to own their patients, I would encourage patients to own their care team and say that, like, this is my doctor. Put that same trust and expectation that you put in your primary care doctor, put into your hospitalist.
I like that. And with that, let's get into your book. So, what was your motivation for writing this book on this particular topic?
Yeah, so I started writing this book in the early stages of the pandemic.
Okay.
The hospital became a very different place where I was used to patients and their family members in the hallway, and there was a lot of access to each other and a community type feeling. Things kind of slowed down. People weren't coming into the hospital because of safety concerns. And I put pen to paper thinking, I'm going to write something to help people in this moment. I'm going to help people navigate the hospital where we are. And as I started doing that, what I found was that I wasn't coming up with any new problems.
Hmm.
I've worked in 7 hospitals on 2 different coasts, and it's the same exact issues over and over. With the pandemic, what COVID did was really just amplify things. The fear that people were feeling about communication just got bigger.
Yeah.
The concerns people had about what was going to happen after they were discharged just got louder. It wasn't anything new. And so in this book, you actually won't find the word COVID because this book is meant to serve as an anytime resource. And I really want people, I don't expect people to love the hospital the way I do, right? It's where I've chosen to grow my career. But what I want is that fear that when people come in, that feeling of, I don't know what's going to happen.
Hmm.
Even if we can relieve, in the book, I say 2%, if we can relieve 2% of that fear, because you have something that you can refer back to and say, like, why exactly are they doing this? Okay, how do I communicate with my team? What do you mean I can't go home? What are all these options that they're talking about? If you have a resource you can flip through on your own time, that's really what I want, is to help relieve that fear. Because I've said it over and over, in the hospital, you meet 20 different people who tell you 30 different things and then have 50 different expectations, right?
That is true.
You can't keep it all straight. And so I in there's a bunch of tools for you to take on your own time. And even if that's after hospitalization, I've had a few people say it helped them unpack what happened, and then also gave them some time to say, if I have to go back again, this is how I would
Hmm.
approach X, Y, and Z. So I think it's a timely source at any time. And it's got pages for people to fill out their thoughts, to practice writing down their medical history. I want this book to be dog-eared, rolled up in your bag. When you're talking to someone, say, hold on, wait a minute, and pull it out and say, okay, is this why we're doing this? I need to know everything when we're talking about informed consent, things like that.
No, I love that. And so most of our clients in our law practice are seniors.
Mhm.
And our focus on the podcast are people like us, the children and grandchildren of seniors. What are some of the challenges that you see in the hospital with senior patients in particular?
I was so waiting for you to ask me this question. So excited about this question. So I'm going to start with a legal one,
Okay.
since you are lawyers. Um, I really would like people to understand that, yes, you help mom and dad on a day-to-day basis. Yes, you may even be listed as their healthcare proxy. But that does not mean that your parents forego their right to privacy and the management of their medical information when they come to the hospital.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I've been waiting to say this into a microphone for a very long time.
No, we have the same challenge sometimes. And sometimes when there are senior clients, we have to put their children out of the conference room or their grandchildren out of the conference room. Not to be mean, but because we have to create that boundary that mom and dad are the patient, are the client. I'm saying the patient are the client. And we are so thankful that you're helping them, but it has to be their wishes. And sometimes that's a very delicate balance. So, how do you strike that balance or make family members understand in the hospital?
So it's really hard because oftentimes it comes up as an angry adult child, mostly because they were not communicated something. And if your loved one is alert and oriented and they are speaking their wishes, I'm not going to know to call you.
And they didn't
I'm
tell you to call them.
right. And they didn't tell me to call.
Yes.
Or well, another thing that happens is I say, you know, your daughter Sheila, do you want me to give her a call? And they say, you know, Sheila's working and she has the kids. It's okay. I'll call her later. And then I will get an angry adult child saying, nobody called me. What do you mean you spoke to my mother? But I have to protect her right to her medical information and her medical privacy. And it is not assumed that everyone over the age of 65 has like foregone those rights,
Yes.
right? What is assumed is that if you are alert and oriented and you are making your decisions and communicating your wishes, that I am communicating with you as the patient, and you are managing how that information is disseminated to whomever you feel it should be disseminated.
So what is some advice that you can give children and grandchildren of aging parents or grandparents that have kind of stepped in that role as caregiver, as helping them out, but their parents and grandparents have capacity. They can still make decisions for themselves, but they're just kind of helping out. What advice can you give them if their parent or grandparent winds up in the hospital about how to navigate that?
So what I say is set up communication expectations early, make those expectations reasonable, easily achievable, and known to everybody. So what I mean by early is stay with your loved one through their admission process. I know it can be hard and we have a lot of things to do, but if an elderly person is in the emergency room by themselves, and again, they're alert, they're oriented, they're communicating their wishes, I don't know that their daughter Sheila is their care partner. But if you meet with me during the time of admission or early in their admission and say, hi, in front of mom, right? Hi, I'm Sheila. I'm her daughter. I'm helping take care of her. I would appreciate a call, you know, every day at 11, or like when you talk to the cardiologist or X, Y, and Z, and then turn to mom and say, Mom, is that okay? And mom says, yeah, call Sheila. Now we're all on the same page. That expectation has been set early. It's a reasonable expectation. I've had people say, like, I need to be called every time my mom gets a medicine. That's not a reasonable expectation, right? It's still a healthcare system that's trying to service a ton of people. No one likes to hear it when they say, like, you're not the only one, but you have to think that if you want to get the best out of the interaction, make things reasonable and achievable, right? So like after you meet with the cardiologist, after her CAT scan, something where you're getting information, right? I always try and say to family members, I'll call you after X, Y, and Z so we have something to talk about. Otherwise, am I just calling with the same information from yesterday, right? Every conversation should achieve something, right? And you've made that communication expectations known to everyone, including mom, right? So mom is on board because she can also say, no, that's okay, Sheila, right?
Right.
um,
Right.
and I think the medical record being available online kind of leads to this weird situation where some people don't use electronic, you know, devices or
For
medical
sure.
records or emails, right? And so they give their kids, oh, just log on for me.
Yes.
And that may also make the medical record and their privacy issue kind of shaky.
Yes.
So if you're caring for somebody, in addition to what I just said about setting up expectations in the hospital, take some time and set up expectations amongst each other and say,
That's
like, Mom,
important. Yeah.
what do you want me to do if you're hospitalized? How much do you want me to be in contact with the doctors? Mom, this is your medical record. This is your right to privacy, because there may be things in there like a lab value from like 15 years ago that they may not want you to
You don't
have
know.
access to, right?
Absolutely.
And it's kind of hard because on my end, I understand their frustration. That's their loved one. They want to take care of them. They are taking care of them. And it looks like me as a doctor just hasn't reached out,
Right.
right? But they have not foregone that right to privacy simply because of their age. And part of caring for someone is respecting their rights.
That's a difficult part.
Yeah.
That is, and I have aging parents, and I have started going to the doctor with them more. Um, and I've been told that I have a takeover spirit. And so, like, acknowledging, and this is something that we talk about all the time on the podcast, we're dealing with clients, that like aging adults are still adults. That you don't return to being a kid just because you're a senior now.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us that are in that kind of caretaker role or getting there, sometimes we forget that. And so I think that is an important thing to remember. Um, I wanted to ask, because our podcast, our practice is really focused on the African American community in particular, because there is some knowledge gaps and resource gaps there in certain areas. Do you see anything in particular in African American patients, African American senior patients, that you think would be worth addressing and acknowledging?
So I think the unfortunate thing that we have to acknowledge is that healthcare inequities are a reality for our community, right? You're going to be hard pressed to find any healthcare provider who will outright say, like, I don't practice in an equal and equitable way. But the research shows time and time again that health outcomes for our community are different. And what I say to people is lean on your community. Don't go through hospitalization alone, right? And it doesn't just fall on the caretaker, because a caretaker can't know and be everything, right? Someone's daughter, Sheila, may not be the nurse. It might be her cousin, Tanya, who is the nurse in the family and can help you understand what's happening and speak to the doctors in a way to get the information you're looking for. The more that you can lean on your community to be aware and to advocate for yourself is going to be the best thing to help bolster you through a hospitalization. And then also escalate your concerns in a timely fashion, right? There's a lot of times where people are just so caught up in the thing that's happening and getting through the hospitalization, that something happened that may have rubbed them the wrong way or they felt unsafe about, and they're like, let's just get through this. No, stop and address it in a timely fashion. Address it first to the person with whom that thing is happening, right? So if you feel like a nurse is not treating you appropriately or is doing something unsafe, let's stop and address this issue now. And then everybody has a boss, right? So who is the charge nurse? Who is the nurse manager? How do I escalate my concerns through patient advocacy? You're not just doing those things for yourself, you're doing those things for the people who come after you as well. And
Absolutely.
that's really important to know, that healthcare only gets better when we put stress on it. And part of the stress is the expectations of patients, and those expectations should be met, right? It should be that healthcare is equitable and safe and timely. And so lean on your community and learn how to escalate your concerns. We are up against
Can I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
intervene right there on the lean on your community? Because a lot of times, especially seniors, I have witnessed, they like to keep things to themselves. So when you lean on your community, like, I, a couple weeks ago, my uncle was in the hospital, and getting him to tell people that he was in the hospital was a real challenge. People would call and not know he was in the hospital and ask, how are you doing? He would say fine, carry on a full conversation as I was sitting there beside his hospital bed, and never tell them he was in the hospital. And I see this thing that happened that I keep seeing in even in different aspects in our community in particular, of us liking to keep things a secret or not share as much as we should share. And so I just wanted to kind of put a fine point on the benefit of letting not just your daughter Sheila know, but like your niece or nephew who might be a doctor or might be a nurse or might, like, there are resources sometimes within your family or within your circle that you're not using because we like to keep things really close to the vest.
So there's a lot of, like, unfortunately, insider information in every sphere. And so recently I heard about a study that was done on disparate health outcomes around heart failure here in Boston. I don't have the exact paper with me. I was at a conference when someone was presenting it, and they said they were studying why the African American community had poor outcomes for heart failure within this major hospital system. And Boston hospital systems are so, worldwide known, and this is where people come to do research. So why are we having this? And one of the things that they found was that it was less likely that the Black patients were being put on the heart failure service. Now, heart failure is kind of the bread and butter of hospital medicine. All of us can treat it or should be able to treat it really well. But there's a difference. There's always a difference when you're being seen by a specialized team, right? Because that specialized team has specialized stuff.
Right.
And those specialized things are what makes the difference. And so what they found that it wasn't that they were getting different medicines, it wasn't that they were living in different neighborhoods, it was that they were being put on different medical services. Why were they being put on different medical services? Because some patients knew that there was a special heart failure medical service.
Ah,
Some patient's sister knew, oh, you're getting admitted for heart failure. Did you make sure they put you on the heart failure service? Oh, because that's going to be in the new building. And that's where X, Y, and Z, right? And so people don't think they're doing a bad thing
right.
because, I would say if you gave me a heart failure patient, I know how to treat heart failure. But again, I'm not part of a specialized team that likely has somebody calling you 2 days after discharge, or someone who gets your medicines brought directly to your bed, like those little special things that happen on these highly specialized services. Um, and so this is where I say, like, lean on your community, because people don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so I've been saying, I apologize. It is about taking advantage of the things that are available to you. And you're right. I'm West Indian. My family's from Jamaica. They love their secrets. You know, I understand. I do. But there does come a point where it's really not servicing you anymore, And even if it's not the person directly, as their caretaker, you also need someone to navigate and help direct you and support you when someone's in the hospital. A hospitalization is extremely stressful for everybody involved. And so
Absolutely.
caretakers as well, lean on your community, because you're going to need that extra bolstering of support to get through that.
I also wanted to touch on something that I've noticed in seniors, and even, my parents are pretty outspoken people, but I've noticed in their as they age, they are more accommodating in a doctor's office, a hospital, wherever it is. They're less likely to ask more questions, more probing questions, challenge things. They are more likely to just go along with what they are told without questioning in the way that I do. And sometimes they wish I were not there because I have all the questions. Can you just speak to the importance of patients feeling empowered to be advocates for their own health?
So you should not only be an advocate for your health, you should think of yourself as the leader of the team, right? The person who's being taken care of is you, and you need to lead this team.
Mm.
Everybody's values and goals are different. One of the things that I see with our older patients in the hospital, when you were saying that your parents are like, oh, she has all the questions, sometimes there's a disconnect between their goals and your goals,
Mm.
right? You're asking a ton of questions because you want something different than what they want out of that, right?
Okay, so let me stop there then. That's a good point. So how do we make sure that we are on the same page, goals wise?
And this is where those awkward conversations at home come in place.
Okay.
And I tell people the best time to have these conversations is when you don't need to have the conversations,
Yes,
when you're
for
not
sure.
sick and I'm not looking at you in the hospital saying, I need a decision. Death and dying, aging and disability are not things people want to talk about,
For sure.
but you have got to sit down and have these uncomfortable conversations with the elderly people, our older adults, our seniors, the people we love. Because as we get older and wiser, like I said, our goals, our values change. So, for instance, I once did a geriatrics clinic, and, you know, it was just all these very older people coming in who could barely get on the exam table and were shuffling in and out, but they were so happy. They were enjoying that level of functioning. When I would ask them, like, what are your goals? What is the thing that you want to do? Their idea of a great day was different from my idea of a great day, right? And so what they accomplish in a day and what they value in accomplishing in a day changed with them and as they aged and what they were trying to do. So sit down and have these conversations. And it's not just about death and dying. A lot of people really do focus on that end of life, and that is extremely important to
Sure.
say, how would you want to be cared for towards the end of your life? Would you want CPR, electric shocks, to be intubated? All of those things are extremely important. And in my book, I have sections for you to fill out your thoughts on that's your code status, right? That's extremely important. But way before that in that journey of life, disability may come up,
Mhm.
right? Um, how do you value how you move? How much do you want to be able to interact with certain things? What is the thing that is important to you that you value? And some people may say, like, being with my dog at home. I'm happy with that. If I can watch my shows and hang out with my dog, that's a great day for me. And other people may say, if I can't eat because you know that I love a good steak, but if I have something that means that I can't eat anymore, I
Yes.
can't safely swallow, I wouldn't want to have a feeding tube, right? So all of the things that happen along that journey are also going to be impacted by your
Sure.
goals and your values. You fear of pain, right?
Mm.
Wanting invasive procedures and surgeries, right? For some people, avoiding surgery is a huge goal,
Sure.
right? For other people, they've been under the knife because they've, had knee replacements and this and that. So it's not that big a deal for them, right? Um, how we've lived our life, what we've seen happen to others, our cultural and religious values,
Mhm.
all of that comes into play when we talk about the decisions that we make for our health. And so, yeah, sit down and have hard conversations with your loved ones about things like dialysis. would you ever want to be put on a dialysis
Right.
machine?
Which is
Would you?
not something that we would usually even,
No.
we talk about having tough conversations, but we do talk about more end of life, not um that specific. But um
Yeah, I think it's how we view death and dying in this country.
yes.
We're very separate from it, and so we understand traumatic death really well here. You get hit by a bus, boom, people understand that that is incompatible with life, right? But the journey of life to death and dying and everything that happens before that, we tend not to understand as part of that journey. And so you're right, people don't talk about dialysis, because they don't talk about illness,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and we have really great things in medicine now. Like if you watch enough TV, people will think that we can do this and hook you up to that and do a couple pumps and you'll be great. You'll be doing ballroom dancing a couple of episodes later, right? But that's not always the case. A
Yeah.
lot of these things come with a certain amount of weight, a certain amount of dedication to be able to care for things, right?
Yeah.
And so, is this something that you want? Is this something you're capable of maintaining? Is this something your family can maintain? Um, it's hard. It's a hard conversation because your mind doesn't naturally go there. And what ends up happening, something bad happens, and then you have me looking at you going, like, do you want to put mom on dialysis? No one has ever thought about that. And so you think, well, I gotta do it. If I don't do it, but have you and mom talked about
Right.
how much invasive stuff does she want?
Chances
What
are you and mom have not talked about.
right, chances are not.
Chances are not. I remember when I was doing, I'd started talking to my parents about doing their estate planning, their long-term care planning, and they looked at me like I was crazy. And my dad was just like, I mean, I thought that I've never thought about long-term care. So I thought me and your mom would just live, and then one day we just would wake up and we would just, that would be it. And so, but I was so surprised, but I think that's a lot of people. They think you live and then you die. And
Yeah.
that point in the middle where illness comes
Mhm,
in, we don't really want to spend a lot of time really thinking
mhm.
about and planning for that. I know I have to get out of here, but I did want to ask you because I do think you have a unique perspective as a hospitalist. I mean, we would consider you being on the other side.
Yeah.
Um, what, how do you view patient advocacy, patients asking questions, patients um, really making sure that their goals are upheld through their medical care when they're in the hospital? Because I think oftentimes patients, especially senior patients, sometimes may hold back because they feel like they will offend, or that they will upset the doctor if they push too much or ask too
Mhm.
many questions or have too many opinions about their medical care. So as someone who is on that other side, what is your perspective on that?
So, I have an older cousin who's also an oncologist, and when I started residency, I really had a hard time, and I said that, "Patients are not listening to me." And she said, "You are an advice giver. Understand that you have gone to medical school to give people the best advice that you have, and people don't have to listen to that.
Mm,
People can choose your advice, and people can choose other things." And that really changed how I view my medical practice. So personally, I don't have a personal problem with patients asking lots of questions. The more information you have is the better we can walk along this plan together and make a plan, like I said, that fits your values and your goals. There can sometimes personally be disconnects, if I find that someone may be asking for something that is not achievable or it may be not safe. Um, and so that's where I have learned the art of conversation and drawing these concerns out and to talk about like my concerns as your physician, why I don't think this procedure is appropriate and, kind of put that out there. But I understand that everyone's not going to see Dr. Nugent. And so you may come
Right.
across a couple of physicians who may take it a little differently. And what I want to say there is, uh, just as much as we expect and we try to teach physicians to have good bedside manner and interact with patients, patients and their families should also know that they're interacting with a
Mhm.
human who is bringing their own values, their own goals, their own professional expectations, and their own professional stressors to that interaction, right? And so learning how to speak to your physician is the same as your physician learning how to speak to you. Right. And so there may be some emotional intelligence that goes along with that.
Can you elaborate a little bit about learning how to speak to your medical professional?
Yeah. So learning how to speak to your physician will look at the environment, the conversations that you're having with your primary care doctor, your cardiologist, your specialist in the office are very different conversations. Number one, you have signed up to be there. Right? So you're coming in a more controlled and relaxed state.
Sure.
And so you may have a little bit of a different set of stressors versus somebody in the hospital who may have to make really quick decisions,
Mhm.
may have to give you bad news, may have to talk to you about discharge. And so see that, like, what they're coming to you with, just like you have a set of expectations, they have a set of expectations, right? And so what they're coming to you with is, okay, look, we got to talk about getting out the hospital, X, Y, and Z and Z. And if you're not open to that conversation, they're not going to be open to your conversation
Ah,
either.
got you.
Right. And so learn to hear what their concern is, because a lot of the time their concern is legit, right? So they may say, like, I want to talk about your blood counts today. Um, and yes, you may want to talk about your upcoming procedure, but you can't have that procedure if your blood counts are not good, right? And so it is a back and forth conversation. And that's an unpopular opinion, um, that I get when I talk to patients and patient advocates, because I think a lot of the time we've put all this idea that a physician should know how to communicate with
Yes.
you. A physician is not always going to know how to communicate with every human that they come across.
Sure.
Bedside manner is not just a skill that's taught in medical school, it's a skill that's honed over years of doing their practice, and their bedside manner changes with the patients that they're seeing. How I speak to my patients is not how I would speak to a child, right? My bedside manner for pediatric patients should be very different. And it comes with the different specialties. And let's not forget that sometimes your providers, I've worked with several providers who are on the spectrum,
Hmm.
right? And so they're coming to the interaction maybe with a little bit of a disability themselves to
Sure.
read what's happening.
And we don't
But
ever think about that.
right. And then you also the one that I think people forget is that sometimes people think they're really doing good. Like they
Yes.
really do. I've worked with a number of providers and patients who the patient said to me will say things like, they came in and they totally just dismissed me and said, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of you." And they rubbed my hand and they said, "Everything's going to be fine." And they walked out. And then I asked the doc what happened. He's like, "I was so supportive. I went in there. I was like, 'Don't worry about it. It'll be okay.' I rubbed her hand. I told her, everything's going to be all right." And then I walked out the room, right? So, like, people can also think they're doing really good,
Right, 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 right. And
right?
different people communicate in different ways. And as you are interacting with so many different communication styles, like there's no way to get it right all the time.
There's no way. I can think back to several instances where I grimace at how I interacted and spoke with a patient. And as the physician I was 12 years ago is not the physician that I am today. It's not going to be the physician I am 12 years from now, right?
So let me ask you, I keep saying this is my last question, then I ask another one. So then when a physician comes in and they are communicating in a way that is not um acceptable to you, or the most beneficial for you guys to have a conversation, a give and take, what are ways that patients can express that without being offensive?
So I think one of the ways is just acknowledge it. Say, Dr. Nugent, I feel like something is off here. I'm not able to hear you because this interaction is going south. And that's a tactic I use when I feel like an interaction is going south with a patient. I'll say like, hey, let's stop here. I don't think you're hearing me, and I don't think I'm hearing you because there's something going on here, right? Um, but also like address the thing that's happening. Say like, Dr. Nugent, I can't really participate in this conversation because I'm in so much pain.
Mm.
I can't really participate with this conversation because I'm so nervous about the thing you told me yesterday. I can't participate because I just got back from a test. So like acknowledge the thing that's happening. And I think if you stop and slow the conversation down and allow every party to kind of renegotiate what's happening, you might get a different outcome. Is that going to work 100% of the time? No, right? Healthcare workers are not a separate set of saints who come down from the clouds to do a shift and then go back up into the heavens,
Yeah.
right? They are humans who are bringing with them every stressor that they have in their life as well, right? And so it's not that I'm asking people to have patience. What I'm asking people to do is understand that there's a lot of things that go into a bad interaction. And so it's your responsibility to yourself to navigate your way out of that. And
Mhm.
and how you do that, like you said, it is really going to be important to maintain the therapeutic relationship, because things that are never acceptable, cursing at providers, yelling at providers, threatening providers, do all of those things happen? Yes, they all happen.
Yeesh. That's
You
a
know,
lot.
the New York Times recently had a really good video piece on people being assaulted in hospitals, right? You don't think about that, but healthcare providers are assaulted on a regular basis in hospitals, um, emotionally as well,
For
you know?
sure.
And so it, it, it is a relationship. And I will spend my career continuing to teach med students and physicians how to manage their end of the relationship. I also want to teach patients how to handle their end of the relationship.
No, I love that. I love that. And so as we get out of here, is there one thing, if our listeners don't get anything else, and there are plenty nuggets, so there's a plenty things you should have gotten from this conversation, but that if there is one overall theme you want to make sure that every listener walks away with that listens to this episode, what is it?
Something actually that we haven't touched on.
Okay.
Take care of your mental health while you're in the hospital. Focusing solely on the medical problem that brought you in is not going to get you to feel better. It's not going to get
Mm.
you through all of it, because you're not just one problem. You are a person who's experiencing this illness, this accident, this something in all parts of you. And I always want people to take care of their mental health, and caretakers also. Like I said, reach out to your community as a caretaker. If you are hospitalized and you take a medicine for anxiety or depression, let us know. That should be added to your medication list, right? If it's safe to take it, it's not going to interact with any of the new medicines that you might need. You should get that medicine. Keep in touch with your community. If you journal, journal. If you pray, pray. Reach out to your religious leaders, somebody who can come and sit with you and give you a little bit of peace. If you're going to be a part of a family event that you might miss, see if they can send you a Zoom link and participate in the birthday and still see the grandkids and their joy. Pay attention to how you're feeling and your emotions as well. A hospitalization tends to be a short event in somebody's life.
Sure.
Average hospitalization in this country is about 5 days, 4.5 to 5 days, right? But it's a heavy 4.5 to 5
For
days.
sure. For
And
sure.
and if you're going through it alone, if you're not paying attention to your anxieties, your fear, if you're not sleeping, if you're not eating, the recovery is just going to take that much longer. So, take some time and pay attention to your mental health.
And tell everyone where they can get your book, Prescription for Admission.
Yeah, Prescription for Admission is available anywhere that you buy books online, Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com. You can check out my website, Dr. Monique Nugent, as well. I have some really great downloads there to start these conversations around wishes on code status. And I also have a really great download on how to create a family meeting with your hospitalist in the hospital so you're getting information. That's what we talked about, communication. I also have a few of the podcasts that I've been a guest on and some other things. So I'm growing that website. But yeah, check me out on barnesandnobles.com, amazon.com, and anywhere that you buy books. It's Prescription for Admission. And I guarantee you that I put my heart and soul to it to make sure patients and their caretakers have what they need to get through a hospital stay.
And this book sounds like a book that it should be in everyone's home. And it's an interactive book, not in the home on the shelf, but in the home working through it, so that you have the answers to these questions should your loved one ever go into the hospital. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Nugent, for taking some time out and talking to us. You've given us so many nuggets. I'm going to have to just go back and listen and so much good advice. And we hear this all the time, but I think it is so much richer hearing it from someone that is in the hospital every day, that is on the other side, that is actually seeing patients and witnessing the interactions and what happens. For you to be able to give us that insight has been fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Olivia. Like I said, I'm so happy to spend some time with you.
And as always, to our listeners, if you have any suggestions for upcoming episodes or any feedback, we always love to hear you. You can reach out to us on social media or our email and let us know what you think and let us know what you want to hear about next. Until next time, bye, guys. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was really, really good. It was a different, we talked about this before, but I think this time was in a different way, and had some different perspectives that I haven't considered, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners haven't either. So thank you.
Oh no, thank you. And I would love to come back and talk more about some of these topics. Clearly it's not something we talk about enough. So if you guys are ever like, hey, let's talk about end of life stuff and what goes on in hospice, I would love to sit down and spend some time. It's something that I see like over and over again in our community. We have a really hard time with a lot of these big topics. And it's like you say, people don't talk about it.
No, they don't. You should see them in getting their estate planning done.
Oh,
not wanting to tell us not wanting to tell us anything. And so it has become very comical, but
oh no, I once had an aunt who wouldn't let her kids tell other people she died.
what?
Yes.
It's definitely generational. Let me stop our recording.